Have you ever watched someone dig their own grave, hand them a titanium shovel, and charge them for the dirt in corporate America? The most dangerous person is not the screaming executive. It is the quiet woman in the corner who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. Sit tight, and let me tell you how a $400 million patent dispute was won and a toxic career was vaporized over a dozen cardboard boxes. Hello, amazing listeners of Boss Revenge Stories, and thank you sincerely for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep bringing you these incredible narratives. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon, where you can access exclusive, much longer, and highly detailed true stories that we cannot make public on YouTube, fully produced with multiple emotional voice actors. You can join our community by scanning the QR code currently on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link down in the video description or pinned comment. Now, let us dive right into today's corporate nightmare, where you will meet our protagonist, 34-year-old Savannah Ross. I am a quiet, practical realist. I hold the title of Head of Legal Data Archiving at Ethelgard Biosciences, a massive pharmaceutical giant based in the freezing, fast-paced heart of Boston. I spend my days ensuring that when federal regulators come knocking, we hand them impenetrable fortresses of documentation. My domain consists of climate-controlled rooms and fireproof vaults, and I control the physical evidence of all our medical research. In the high-stakes world of biotechnology, where a single missing decimal point can invite a massive federal lawsuit, the person who guards the paper trail is the one holding the actual keys to the kingdom. I do not do flashy presentations, and I do not do corporate buzzwords. I do bulletproof compliance. Enter Chloe Vance. Chloe was our newly minted Director of Operational Optimization, and she was the absolute embodiment of everything wrong with modern corporate culture. Chloe was the kind of executive who lived entirely on social media, constantly documenting her matcha lattes and designer outfits for her thousands of followers. She had been hired because she gave a viral presentation about optimizing synergy in the digital workspace. She did not know the first thing about biotechnology, patent law, or laboratory protocols. Her vocabulary was a nauseating salad of empty corporate catchphrases. Every sentence she spoke contained terms like digital transformation, disruptive thinking, and synergistic paradigm shifts. She looked down on those of us who did the quiet, unglamorous work of keeping the company legally compliant, viewing us as annoying obstacles to her aesthetic vision. The disaster began on a Tuesday morning. Chloe called a mandatory, all-department meeting. She stood at the front of the glass-walled conference room, holding a glowing tablet, wearing a blazer that likely cost more than my monthly rent. She projected a heavily filtered slideshow on the smartboard and gleefully announced her grand vision for the fourth quarter. She declared that we were going to completely clear out physical storage area 4. Why? Because Chloe had decided that our senior executives desperately needed a wellness lounge. She wanted to convert the heavily secured, temperature-controlled archival room into a bespoke kombucha bar and an acoustic meditation space for upper management. Now, if you are not in the biotech industry, you might think a storage room is just a storage room, but physical storage area 4 was not filled with spare office chairs or old marketing brochures. That room contained the original, physical laboratory notebooks dating back to the year 2014. These were not printed documents. These were the actual bound notebooks containing the handwritten formulas, the wet ink signatures of the founding biochemists, and the official witness verification stamps. Those specific books were the foundational bedrock of Ethelgard's flagship medication, a drug currently generating several $billion a year. In patent law, priority is everything. You have to prove exactly when an idea was conceived. Those notebooks were the holy grail, the only reason this company was a giant in the industry. I raised my hand. I kept my voice perfectly level and professional. Cutting through her monologue about chakra alignment, I explained that under the United States Patent Act, digital copies do not hold supreme legal standing during intellectual property disputes. I told her that if our patents were ever challenged in a federal court, A judge would demand to see the original wet ink signatures to verify the exact dates of invention. I stated clearly that destroying those notebooks would strip the company of its primary legal armor. Chloe stared at me as if I had just suggested we start using carrier pigeons. She let out a loud, theatrical scoff that echoed across the quiet conference room. She paced around the long oak table, rolling her eyes, and openly mocked me right there in front of 50 colleagues. "Oh, Savannah," she sighed, using a condescending tone. "You archivers are always so terrified of the cloud. We do not need moldy paper cluttering up prime real estate. You are just a dinosaur clinging to the past. Your outdated mindset is exactly what I was hired to eliminate." I tried to speak again, but she held up a hand. The faux-friendly smile vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "I am executing a mandate from the top down," Chloe snapped. "We are going paperless. I want every single piece of paper from Area 4 packed into cardboard boxes. I want an industrial shredding truck in the loading dock by 8 o'clock Friday morning. And I want all of it fed into the blades." I returned to my desk in the archiving department without uttering another word of protest. In the corporate ecosystem, arguing with a narcissist who has newly acquired executive power is a profound waste of oxygen. I walked through the quiet, climate-controlled corridors, letting the ambient hum of the ventilation system calm my breathing. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, adjusted my dual monitors, and let the icy chill of professional detachment wash over me. I was not angry. Anger is a messy, unpredictable emotion that leads to unforced errors. Instead, I felt a deep, absolute clarity. I unlocked my workstation and opened my encrypted inbox. Waiting for me, marked with the highest level of internal security clearance, was an email from our lead litigation counsel. It had arrived just before the catastrophic meeting. The subject line was innocuous, but the contents were explosive. Apexion Pharma, our largest and most ruthless competitor across the river in Cambridge, was gearing up for war. According to our legal intelligence, Apexion was within days of filing a massive, aggressive lawsuit claiming we had stolen the foundational chemical structure for our flagship drug. They were alleging patent infringement on a monumental scale. I read the legal brief carefully, absorbing the gravity of the situation. I knew exactly how this legal battle would unfold. Intellectual property disputes in the biotechnology sector are not fought with broad concepts. They are fought in the microscopic trenches of chronological proof. When the lawsuit dropped, the federal court would immediately issue a preservation order. The judge would demand a physical inspection of our earliest laboratory notebooks to establish the exact date of conception. Forensic experts would be sent to examine the age of the ink, the texture of the paper, and the authenticity of the witness signatures, if those notebooks were missing, or worse, intentionally destroyed. Ethelgard Biosciences would not just lose the lawsuit. The court would instruct the jury to assume the destroyed evidence was damning. We would be forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, and the resulting stock crash would push this company straight into bankruptcy. With the impending doom of the Apexion lawsuit hanging in the air, I turned my attention to the document destruction protocol that Chloe had just uploaded to the company intranet. If she was going to mandate the vaporization of our most critical assets, I needed to see her procedural framework. I downloaded her official policy document and began to read. It was a breathtaking masterpiece of incompetence. As a professional who spent a decade studying compliance regulations, reading Chloe's protocol felt like watching a toddler play with a loaded firearm. The document was riddled with glaring structural holes. It completely bypassed the standard legal hold checks. It ignored the mandatory 30-day quarantine period for sensitive material. Worst of all, the formatting was wildly inconsistent. Midway through page 3, the font abruptly changed, and there was a paragraph referencing the data retention laws of the state of California. Despite the fact that we were firmly located in Massachusetts, it was painfully obvious that our director of operational optimization had not consulted a single lawyer. She had simply gone online, found a free template for a generic office cleanout, copied the text, and pasted it onto a company letterhead. I sat in the quiet glow of my monitors and meticulously formulated my next move. I was a loyal employee, but my loyalty was to the survival of the company and to my own professional integrity, not to the whims of a chaotic manager. I opened a new email. I addressed it directly to Chloe, ensuring I carbon copied absolutely no one. This needed to be a closed circuit between her authority and my compliance. I typed the subject line with deliberate precision: final confirmation request, destruction of Area 4 documents. In the body of the email, I stripped away all emotion. I wrote a clinical, numbered list detailing exactly what she was asking me to do. I explicitly identified the contents of Physical Storage Area 4 as original, irreplaceable laboratory notebooks central to our patent viability. I cited the specific federal regulations regarding the retention of intellectual property records. Finally, I stated in clear, unambiguous terms that destroying these documents exposed the company to catastrophic legal risks and potential regulatory fines. I concluded by asking her to explicitly confirm her directive in light of these stated facts. I clicked send and waited. Watching the digital clock on my desktop, I anticipated she might ignore it, or perhaps forward it to legal to cover her tracks. I underestimated the sheer density of her arrogance. Exactly 3 minutes later, my inbox chimed. Chloe had replied. There was no corporate jargon this time. There were no buzzwords about synergy or transformation. Her response was a raw, unfiltered display of toxic authority. Follow my orders or pack your things and leave. I take full responsibility for all consequences. I read the 2 sentences several times, letting the profound weight of her stupidity sink in. She had not only ordered the destruction of our legal shield, but she had eagerly, voluntarily put her own head on the chopping block in writing. My hands moved with practiced efficiency. I hit the keyboard shortcut to capture a high-resolution screenshot of her reply, capturing her email address, the timestamp, and the full context of our exchange. I sent the image to the heavy-duty laser printer sitting in the corner of my office. The machine hummed to life, pulling a crisp sheet of paper through its rollers. When the page emerged, I walked over, picked it up, and slid it into the mechanical timestamp machine sitting on the edge of my desk. A heavy, satisfying thud echoed in the quiet room as the machine punched the exact date and time into the margin in dark purple ink. I held the physical proof of her mandate in my hands. I carefully placed the sheet of paper into a clear plastic sleeve and locked it inside the fireproof safe under my desk. The cold, sterile environment of the archiving department felt suddenly charged with electricity. The silent tension in my chest dissolved, replaced by the thrilling, calculating calm of a predator watching its prey step willingly into a snare. I smiled, a genuine, quiet smile in the empty room. The game had officially begun. The environment of a corporate headquarters at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday possesses a very specific kind of silence. The daytime chaos of ringing phones and frantic footsteps is replaced by the low, steady hum of the climate control systems and the rhythmic blinking of server racks. I remained at my desk long after the motion sensor lights in the outer corridors had powered down. The glow of my dual monitors illuminated my face in the darkened archiving department. I had a monumental task ahead of me, and it had to be executed with surgical precision. A lesser archivist, perhaps one driven by panic or a misplaced sense of cinematic heroism, might have simply packed the original laboratory notebooks into the trunk of their personal vehicle and driven away into the night. That is exactly what an amateur would do. In the rigid world of corporate law, physically removing proprietary material from company grounds without explicit executive authorization is legally defined as the misappropriation of corporate assets. It is a federal offense. If I simply hid the notebooks, I would instantly become a rogue employee and a thief in the eyes of the law. Furthermore, breaking the chain of custody would render the evidence completely inadmissible when the federal judge demanded to see it. I did not need to steal the documents. I needed a solution that was entirely legal, perfectly documented, and completely invisible to the naked eye. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard as I navigated into the newly installed centralized resource management software. This was the exact platform that Chloe had aggressively championed and rushed to install just 2 weeks prior. In her frantic obsession with eliminating operational friction and creating a seamless digital workflow, she had bypassed several standard IT security audits. She absolutely hated being bothered with minor administrative approvals, claiming they disrupted her creative synergy. To ensure her digital notifications remained clear of clutter, she had programmed her executive profile with a custom macro. This automated script was designed to instantly apply her encrypted, legally binding digital signature to any departmental expense invoice or logistical request that fell under the threshold of $500. It was a massive, glaring oversight in our internal financial controls. It was a gaping security hole just waiting to be exploited, and I was about to drive a freight train right through it. I opened the external vendor portal within the software. I bypassed all of our standard shipping partners and selected a highly specialized, third-party secure storage facility located securely on the outskirts of the city. This was not a standard commercial warehouse. It was an underground, climate-controlled fortress utilized almost exclusively by federal prosecutors, government agencies, and top-tier litigation firms to house subpoenaed evidence. Their intake procedures and chain of custody protocols were absolutely infallible. I initiated a transfer request for 24 heavy-duty archival boxes. I generated a highly detailed logistical waybill, manually inputting the exact dimensions, weight, and security classifications of the original laboratory notebooks currently sitting in Area 4. When the software interface prompted me for payment and managerial authorization, I routed the electronic invoice directly to the Operational Optimization departmental budget, which was Chloe's personal ledger. The total cost for the first 3 months of secure, maximum level custody, including the dispatch of an armored courier transport, came out to exactly $495. I took a slow, deep breath, steadying my heart rate, and clicked submit. The system processed the request for 3 agonizing seconds. The loading wheel spun. Then, a bright green verification checkmark blossomed across the center of my screen. Chloe's automated macro had triggered flawlessly. Her encrypted digital signature, permanently time-stamped and legally binding, was firmly stamped onto the external transfer order, according to the immutable digital ledger of Ethelgard Biosciences. Chloe Vance had just personally authorized, directed, and funded the secure relocation of the company's most vital intellectual property to a legal fortress. She had done exactly what a competent, protective executive should do, entirely by accident, simply because she could not be bothered to read her own daily system reports. The armored courier would arrive at the specialized freight elevator at the loading dock at exactly midnight, operating entirely off the books and long after the regular security patrols had rotated their shifts. The actual, invaluable notebooks were securely whisked away into the night, escorted by armed guards, leaving behind a perfectly empty void in the storage room. Now came the physical phase of the heist. The original boxes were gone, but by Friday morning, Chloe expected to see 24 heavy cardboard boxes stacked and ready for the industrial shredder. Corporate optics demanded a sacrifice, and I needed replacement mass. I accessed the company's internal shared network drive, navigating specifically to the restricted directories that Chloe had recently purged during her aggressive digital transformation crusade. She had created a massive, isolated folder labeled specifically as worthless human resources trash, intending to have the IT department wipe it entirely from the mainframe servers by the end of the fiscal quarter. This was data from her own personal administrative system that she had deemed entirely obsolete. I opened the massive files and routed the data streams directly to the heavy-duty industrial laser printers located down in the basement, machines capable of churning out thousands of pages per hour. I spent the next 4 hours walking back and forth, hauling massive, heavy reams of freshly printed paper into the empty shelves of Area 4. I meticulously filled every single one of the 24 cardboard boxes with these dense, heavy stacks of paper. I packed them tightly, arranging the reams so that the weight distribution and physical resistance would feel completely authentic to anyone who tried to kick or lift them. I grabbed a heavy roll of packing tape and sealed the top flaps of each box with sharp, precise, and deliberate movements. I printed exact, high-resolution replicas of the original barcode labels from the inventory system. I slapped them onto the sides of the cardboard, making sure each one proudly and clearly displayed the fatal designation for Area 4, marked completely ready for destruction, looking exactly as they had yesterday. Throughout this entire grueling process of physical labor, I maintained a perfectly neutral, almost bored expression on my face. The unblinking red recording light of the security dome camera mounted high in the corner of the room tracked my every move. I did not hide from it. I embraced it. If the corporate compliance officers or external auditors ever pulled and reviewed the high-definition footage of this Wednesday night, they would not see a mastermind executing a corporate heist. They would see a fiercely loyal, utterly defeated, and incredibly diligent employee, working late into the early hours of the morning to meticulously fulfill the direct, uncompromising orders of her superior. Every single element was perfectly aligned. The legal paper trail was ironclad. The physical evidence was utterly secure. The trap was fully set, loaded with devastating precision, and completely hidden in plain sight. Friday morning arrived with a biting chill in the autumn air, but the loading dock of Ethelgard Biosciences was bustling with a frantic, unnatural energy. Promptly at 8 in the morning, a colossal industrial shredding truck backed into the primary delivery bay. This was not a standard office paper disposal van. It was a massive, diesel-burning behemoth equipped with heavy steel augers and serrated titanium blades, a machine specifically designed to obliterate thick cardboard, metal binders, and entire hard drives with absolute prejudice. The idling engine sent a low, vibrating hum through the thick concrete floor of the warehouse. Just as the technicians lowered the heavy hydraulic ramp, the metal doors of the loading dock swung open, and Chloe Vance made her grand entrance. She was not dressed for a dusty warehouse environment. She wore a pristine white-tailored suit that gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, completely oblivious to the grease and heavy exhaust fumes filling the room. More importantly, she did not arrive alone. Trailing closely behind her was a professional videographer hoisting a heavy camera rig, completely outfitted with a stabilizing gimbal and a glowing circular ring light. Chloe had decided that simply destroying the foundational legal assets of a billion-dollar company was not enough. She needed to broadcast it. She was live-streaming this entire event directly to the company internal corporate network, transforming a catastrophic legal error into a morning entertainment special for upper management. She turned to face the camera lens, flashing a perfectly rehearsed, impossibly bright smile. "Good morning, Ethelgard Innovators," she announced, her voice echoing sharply off the concrete walls. "Today marks a monumental shift in our corporate paradigm. We are officially stepping out of the dark ages of physical clutter and stepping boldly into a zero-waste, 100% paperless, green era. We are making space for wellness, synergy, and futuristic thinking, out with the old, and in with the optimized." I stood quietly in the far corner of the loading dock, deliberately keeping my body out of the wide frame of the camera. I had my arms securely crossed over my chest, my hands wrapped tightly around a steaming paper cup of pitch-black coffee. I did not move. I did not blink. I simply watched the grotesque theater unfold with the cold, detached fascination of a scientist observing a highly predictable chemical reaction. At Chloe's enthusiastic command, the logistics team began rolling out the heavy wooden pallets loaded with the 24 carefully sealed cardboard boxes I had meticulously prepared late Wednesday night. They were stamped boldly with the bright red destruction authorization labels. Chloe stepped right up to the massive machine, motioning eagerly for the cameraman to zoom in tight. She grabbed the very first heavy box, hoisted it up with a dramatic grunt for her audience, and shoved it directly into the gaping metal maw of the shredder. The symphony of destruction began instantly. The titanium blades engaged with a violent, deafening roar, the sheer mechanical violence of the machine tearing through hundreds of pounds of densely packed printed paper was a physical force you could feel vibrating in your chest. The screech of grinding metal and shredding fiber completely drowned out the idling diesel engine. It was an overwhelming, chaotic noise. the sound of thousands of pages being reduced to microscopic, irretrievable confetti in a matter of mere seconds. Over the deafening roar of the machine, Chloe turned her head and looked directly across the loading dock at me. She held my gaze, a deeply smug, victorious smirk playing on her lips. It was the exact look of an arrogant bully who believed she had just permanently put a dangerous enemy in their place. She grabbed another heavy box, maintaining intense eye contact with me, and aggressively shoved it down into the spinning blades, silently daring me to react, to cry, or to beg her to stop the machine. I gave her absolutely nothing. My expression remained a rigid mask of polite indifference. I took a slow sip of my dark coffee, letting the bitter heat wash over my tongue. Then, moving with calm and deliberate precision, I reached into the breast pocket of my blazer and withdrew a small, leather-bound personal notebook and a silver pen. I did not need to hide my actions. I clicked the pen, glanced at the large digital clock mounted high on the warehouse wall, and wrote down the exact time, 9 hours and 17 minutes in the morning. I painstakingly logged the license plate number of the destruction vehicle. I documented the physical presence of the third-party contractors, the internal logistics staff, and the videographer. Chloe was not just digging her own professional grave. She had intentionally hired a film crew to document the excavation, and she was willingly providing me with legally binding, high-definition video evidence of her own personal liability. The mindless destruction continued until every single box was completely consumed by the roaring metal beast. True to her aggressively misguided vision, the dust had not even settled before the next phase began. By 2 o'clock that very same afternoon, a massive team of expensive interior decorators and construction contractors had invaded the newly emptied storage room. They began rolling out expensive bamboo flooring and installing copper plumbing right on top of the figurative ashes of those cardboard boxes. The bespoke kombucha bar and executive meditation lounge were officially under construction, built directly upon a foundation of spectacular corporate suicide. Exactly 14 days after the heavy shredding truck pulled away from the loading dock, the invisible ticking time bomb finally detonated. It happened on a Tuesday morning, right as the opening bell rang on the New York Stock Exchange. Apexion Pharma did not just quietly file a lawsuit. They dropped a legal nuclear weapon on the federal docket. They publicly accused Ethelgard Biosciences of corporate espionage and massive patent infringement regarding the fundamental chemical structure of our primary cardiovascular medication. The news hit the financial wire like a localized earthquake. Within the first 2 hours of trading, our company's stock price violently plummeted by an astonishing 15%. Automated trading halts were triggered across the market. Hundreds of millions of dollars in market capitalization simply evaporated into thin air before the corporate cafeteria even stopped serving breakfast. The atmosphere inside the headquarters shifted instantly from a comfortable, productive hum to an environment of sheer, unadulterated panic. Emergency alarms blared silently in the form of flashing red notification banners across every computer screen in the building. Executives sprinted down the carpeted hallways with their expensive silk ties loosened and their faces completely drained of color. Shortly before noon, my secure desk phone rang. It was an executive summons. I was ordered to report immediately to the penthouse level, specifically to the primary glass-walled boardroom. When I walked through the heavy double oak doors, the air inside the room was so thick with tension it felt incredibly hard to breathe. The massive mahogany table was surrounded by the highest echelons of corporate power. The chief executive officer sat at the head of the table, his face a storm of barely contained rage and absolute dread. Flanking him were 3 senior members of the board of directors and the entire federal litigation defense team. Chloe Vance was already there, sitting near the middle of the long table. She looked mildly annoyed, aggressively typing on her sleek silver laptop as if this catastrophic, company-ending emergency was merely a frustrating interruption to her daily schedule. The lead counsel for Ethelgard stood at the front of the room. He was a man who usually commanded any room with absolute, unshakable authority. But today, his face was the color of wet ash. He was sweating profusely through his expensive tailored dress shirt. He leaned heavily over the table, planted both his hands firmly on the polished wood, and looked directly at me. "We have a massive crisis," the lead counsel began, his voice tight and trembling with suppressed panic. "Apexion has filed for an emergency injunction to halt all global manufacturing of our flagship drug. They are claiming our digital patent filings from 10 years ago were retroactively manipulated. The federal judge overseeing the case has just issued a mandatory, immediate subpoena. We need to physically produce the original, handwritten laboratory notebooks. I need the wet ink signatures from the founding biochemists, and I need them right now. I need the entire contents of Physical Storage Area 4 boxed up, heavily guarded, and placed on a private jet to the federal courthouse in Washington by 5 o'clock this evening." Before I could even open my mouth to respond, Chloe forcefully shut her laptop. The loud, sharp click of the aluminum casing echoed sharply in the tense room. She stood up, wearing that familiar, condescending smile, completely oblivious to the absolute terror radiating from the legal professionals surrounding her. "There is absolutely no need to panic," Chloe announced brightly, addressing the chief executive officer directly as if she were presenting a brand new, exciting marketing campaign. "We are a modern, agile organization. I have already digitized our entire archival footprint. Every single document from that old storage room is securely backed up on our encrypted cloud servers. You can just print out whatever the judge needs from the digital files. It is faster, it is cleaner, and it perfectly aligns with our new digital transformation initiative." The lead counsel stared at her for a long, agonizing second, looking at her as if she had just started speaking in ancient tongues. The color rushed rapidly back into his face, transforming his pale complexion into a furious, mottled red. When he finally spoke, it was not a professional, measured response. It was a terrifying, guttural roar that genuinely shook the glass walls of the boardroom. "You do not understand anything about federal litigation," he screamed, slamming his open palm against the heavy wooden table so hard that the porcelain coffee cups rattled violently in their saucers. "The plaintiffs have explicitly accused us of forging the digital database. A digital file is completely legally worthless in this scenario. The federal court will not accept a printed copy. They require the physical paper. They need forensic experts to chemically analyze the exact age of the ink and the microscopic cellular structure of the paper fiber to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we invented the formula first. If we do not hand over the physical, original binders today, the judge will immediately issue a default judgment against us. We will lose the exclusive patent. We will lose billions of dollars. This company will be utterly liquidated by the end of the year." Chloe's bright, confident smile instantly melted away, replaced by a mask of sudden, paralyzing terror. She blinked rapidly, looking wildly around the room as the crushing weight of the legal reality finally pierced through her impenetrable bubble of corporate buzzwords. Her hands began to shake violently, her perfectly manicured nails tapping erratically against the sharp edge of the mahogany table. "But," Chloe stammered, her voice suddenly small and trembling, completely stripped of its usual arrogant authority, "but the physical paper is gone." The lead counsel froze completely. The chief executive officer slowly leaned forward in his large leather chair. The entire boardroom plunged into a suffocating, deadly silence. It was so quiet, you could hear the distant traffic on the street far below. "What do you mean? Gone?" the chief executive officer asked. His voice was no longer a roar. It was a deadly, quiet whisper that sent a sharp chill straight down my spine. Chloe swallowed hard, her eyes darting frantically toward me, then back to the furious head of the table. She took a step back, visibly shrinking under the intense, predatory glare of the most powerful men in the building. "I ordered the room to be cleared," she whispered, her voice cracking in pure, unadulterated panic. "I had all the physical documents thrown into an industrial shredding machine 2 weeks ago. We needed to optimize the floor space. I was executing my strategy for the new executive wellness lounge." The silence that followed her confession was absolute and terrifying. No one moved. No one dared to take a breath. The chief executive officer did not yell. He simply sat perfectly still, staring at Chloe with a look of such profound, murderous hatred that it felt as though he was mentally calculating the exact prison sentence she would serve for single-handedly destroying a billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire for the sake of a juice bar. The storm had officially made landfall, and it was tearing the roof right off the building. The heavy, suffocating silence in the boardroom was violently broken by the frantic sound of Chloe scrambling for a lifeline, like a cornered animal realizing the trap had finally snapped shut. She whipped her head around, her panicked eyes locking onto me where I sat quietly at the far end of the long mahogany table. She raised a trembling finger and pointed it directly at my face. "It is her fault," Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly against the thick glass walls, completely shattering any remaining illusion of her corporate composure. "Savannah is the head of archiving. She was fully responsible for the contents of that storage room. She should have physically stopped me from destroying the documents. She knew the rules, and she deliberately let the company fail just to spite me." The senior executives, the board of directors, and the panicked litigation team slowly turned their collective gaze toward me. The air in the room grew completely still. I did not flinch. I did not rush to defend myself, nor did I raise my voice. I slowly pushed my ergonomic chair back, stood up, and casually brushed a piece of invisible lint from the sleeve of my tailored blazer. I reached down to the floor, picked up my heavy leather briefcase, and placed it onto the polished wood. With a satisfying click, I unfastened the brass locks. "No one let the company fail. Chloe," I said, my voice projecting a calm, icy authority that immediately commanded the absolute attention of every powerful person in the room. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a thick, securely bound manila folder, and tossed it effortlessly down the length of the table. It slid perfectly across the polished mahogany, coming to a smooth halt directly in front of the lead counsel. The original physical laboratory notebooks, complete with the vital wet ink signatures and the foundational biochemical formulas, were never destroyed, I announced, keeping my tone clinical and precise. They are currently residing safely inside a maximum security, climate-controlled subterranean vault managed by our external litigation support vendor. They were safely transported under armed guard late Wednesday night, completely intact, establishing a flawless and unbroken chain of custody. They are categorized, protected, and fully ready to be presented to the federal judge this afternoon. The collective exhale in the boardroom was a physical wave of relief. The lead counsel desperately ripped open the folder, his frantic eyes scanning the official chain of custody documents, the verified inventory lists, and the cryptographic security stamps. He let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh, collapsing heavily back into his leather chair as if he had just been forcefully pulled back from the edge of a fatal cliff. The chief executive officer looked at me with an expression of sheer awe, treating me as if I were a conquering hero who had just single-handedly pulled his billion-dollar empire from the ashes. But Chloe was not relieved. Her brief moment of panic violently mutated into a frantic, humiliated rage. The color rushed back into her face, turning her skin a deep, blotchy crimson. She slammed both of her hands flat onto the table, leaning aggressively toward me. "Then what the hell did you have me shred on Friday?" she screamed, completely abandoning any remaining shred of professional decorum. "I fed 24 heavy cardboard boxes into that industrial machine while the corporate cameras were rolling. If you secretly moved the actual notebooks on Wednesday, what exactly did you pack into those boxes for me to destroy?" I looked directly into her furious eyes, allowing a slow, freezing smile to finally break across my face. It was the exact moment I had been waiting for since the day she first sneered at me and called me a dinosaur. "You gave me a direct, uncompromising mandate to empty that room by Friday morning," I explained, keeping my tone deceptively polite and helpful. "However, your corporate optics required you to have physical boxes to destroy for your live stream. I needed replacement mass. So, late Wednesday night, I accessed the internal company network and went straight into the specific administrative directories you had recently purged during your aggressive digital transformation crusade." Chloe stared at me, her eyes widening, the aggressive posture suddenly faltering as a new, unfamiliar wave of dread washed over her. I utilized the massive folder that you personally labeled as worthless human resources trash. I continued, savoring every single syllable as it hung in the quiet room. You categorized those files for permanent deletion to optimize your digital workspace, but the IT department had not yet wiped the servers. I simply routed that data stream to the heavy-duty industrial printers down in the basement. I printed all of it, packed the resulting thousands of pages into your boxes, and slapped the Area 4 destruction labels right on top. "What files?" Chloe whispered. Her voice was barely audible, trembling with a sudden, overwhelming terror. "Well, that is the truly tragic part of your modern digital transformation strategy," I said, tilting my head slightly. "You never actually read the documents you categorized as trash. You simply grouped them by date and discarded them blindly to clear your inbox. I filled those boxes with your undigitized executive stock option certificates. I included your original, ink-signed life insurance contracts. I also packed in the exclusive, physical copies of your personal profit-sharing agreements. In your frantic rush to clear your desk and look like a visionary, you flagged the only existing physical proof that you own $5 million in Ethelgard Biosciences equity as worthless trash." A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the boardroom. The executives stared at Chloe in absolute paralyzed disbelief. And because our corporate bylaws strictly require the presentation of physical, notarized signatures to legally execute the vesting of those specific senior executive stock options, I concluded, my voice dropping to a final, devastating register. You just permanently vaporized your entire financial future. You happily fed your own fortune into a titanium shredder just to generate content for a social media video. Chloe completely collapsed. Her knees simply gave out beneath her. She hit the floor of the boardroom with a heavy, pathetic thud. She knelt there on the expensive carpet, clutching her chest, gasping for air as the catastrophic reality of her own arrogance finally crushed her. She had spent weeks trying to dig my grave, and in the end, I simply handed her a shiny new shovel and watched her willingly bury herself alive. The chief executive officer stood up, looking down at the pathetic display on the floor with absolute disgust. "Chloe," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth or pity, "you are terminated, effective immediately. You are being fired for gross incompetence, reckless endangerment of corporate assets, and the intentional destruction of private property, even if that property happens to be your own. Security will escort you out of the building. You have absolutely nothing left here." He then turned his gaze to me. His expression shifted from disgust to profound, calculated respect. "Savannah," he instructed smoothly, "go downstairs and clear out your desk in the archiving department. As of this exact moment, you are being promoted to the Global Director of Risk Management. We desperately need someone with your precise level of operational ruthlessness sitting at the top of this company." The emergency meeting was adjourned. I calmly gathered my briefcase and walked out of the heavy glass doors, leaving Chloe weeping silently and uncontrollably on the floor. I took the elevator down to the main lobby, passing right by the confused construction crew, who were currently standing around the half-built kombucha bar, unsure of what to do next. I stepped up to the lobby cafe, ordered a simple, pitch-black coffee, and took a long, slow sip. It was bitter, incredibly strong, and it tasted exactly like absolute, undisputed victory. Hello again. Amazing listeners, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for staying with me and listening to this incredible corporate journey today. I would absolutely love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop your city or country in the comments below. If you truly enjoyed today's revenge story and want to help us keep this channel alive, please consider supporting us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon. There, you can listen to the absolute best, highly exclusive true stories that are simply too intense and detailed for us to make public on YouTube. You can easily join by scanning the QR code right here on your screen, or by using the Patreon link provided in the video description or the pinned comment below. Thank you again for your incredible support, and stay tuned for the next downfall.